Hey guys, it's Jay. So today is July 31st, means almost August, so a lot of those internships you guys are been working so hard on are finishing up soon, and it's almost time for recruiting season. Woo. Yeah, I know, right? But, along with that, it's really good to take this time that you have kind of a week in between before you start school to just go back and look at your resume and make sure that you're up to date on the skills that you have and that you're really doing your best to put your best foot forward in front of these companies coming up in the fall. So a little background about me, if you guys don't know who I am, I graduated in 2016 in the spring with my bachelor's in chemical engineering. I started a job recently at Apple. I've been working there for about 2 months and was really involved in clubs when I was back at Berkeley. So I was president of AICHE, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, for a year, and I was co-founder of 2 clubs, if you know Food Science and Tech, and also the Biofuels Club. I've gotten 2 internships over the time that I went to school, and now my first full-time job. So I feel like over my span of my career so far, I've had something over 30-40 interviews, spent hundreds of hours on my own resume and other people's resumes, and really would just like to point out a few things that I think are really helpful for you guys get right the first time, and then kind of go through and make sure you keep improving on over the course of your recruiting seasons. Now, before we get to that, I want to talk about the recruiting season in general. So a lot of people think that it's something on the side that you really just go to career fairs and info sessions, and you have your resume and you sort of know what you want and you think you're going to get a whole lot out of it just putting in that amount of effort. But in my opinion, recruiting is a skill that you can develop like anything else, like being good at a sport or doing well in a class. There's a lot of parts to it, and you need to make sure that you're good at a lot of them. So some of those parts include, how well your resume is written, how well your cover letters are written, how good your interview skills are, knowing what your interests are, being able to communicate those interests to the companies that you're going for. And really from there, there's the whole process, right? So you've got kind of the beginning where you're recruiting and looking for a company to work for. And then you get the internship or job, you work there for a while, how do you get the best out of that job? And then kind of when you close that job or move somewhere else, or your internship ends or something, how do you really wrap up everything that you've learned and kind of move on to the next thing? In this video in particular, I want to kind of focus on the resume portion, because this is kind of the season to do it. So since I've been starting working in industry, like, here's the deal. People really don't have time to read your resume, even if they're dedicated recruiters in HR. They've got thousands of resumes to look through, and they really just want at a glance to see if they fit, if you fit what they're looking for, and then they'll very quickly just go ahead and, that's how you get your foot in the door to the interview. The main purpose of your resume really is to get a snapshot of you that these recruiters can kind of filter through the thousands of applicants to see, all right, this person might be a potential fit. But beyond that, it's really about just making that first impression. So the main point really is to be terse. Well, not even terse necessarily, but really hit those points very clearly that you want to communicate, and make sure that these recruiters are able to look over it once and get those points. That's the really important part. You may look over your resume, hundreds of times to make sure that you understand it really well, but the recruiter will only look once. That's the mentality I think that you have to have. So when you only look at a page full of text once, what are some things that make it easier for that impression to last? First of all, you want readability and white space. There's definitely a lot of value in having a good amount of white space on a resume. And I can't really give you a ratio for that, but if you look at your resume and it's just like this big block of text, who's gonna want to read that? These people aren't machines, they're humans, and humans, like to read things that are very well spaced out, have a very readable font, and are just organized really well. Make sure your headers and descriptions and stuff are really well kind of labeled. Try to keep it consistent. Your dates are consistent. But I'm not going to go into detail about how you would do that. I think those are more general things you can find anywhere else when you make a resume. But just keep in mind, that's really what you're trying to go for. I think the hardest part about writing a resume is usually people know what they want to put on it, like different jobs they've had, different companies they've worked for, but then when they get to the point they've written their company and then the title of their job, and now it's time to write about actually what you did. In general, I think there should be a good ratio of what I like to call soft points and hard points. So a soft point is something that you really don't have any numbers to tie to. It's just describing what you did, like what your daily duties were, what you were responsible for, things like that. That's really important. I think the first bullet point for a lot of your jobs or your positions should tell you what you've done. So if you were an officer in a club, you would say what your duties are, what sort of activities you managed or did, maybe the committees of people that you had. Same with having an internship or something. Maybe you'll describe different experiments you ran or different projects that you managed, stuff like that. You should definitely have at least one of those points. But what I don't see from a lot of people is what I like to call these hard points. Making sure you have these numbers, these results, like results. Recruiters want to see you've done a position that you actually contributed, that you actually made the company better in some way. And usually the way people measure that is through something quantifiable. So whether you made a process more efficient by an X percentage or saved this much money on a project, those things are really important. Whatever positions you have those bullets, if they're all soft points, that really doesn't tell me a whole lot, in my opinion, about what you did at that job. If you really didn't improve the company in any way. Because think about it, if I'm an employer and I have thousands of candidates in front of me, chances are a good amount of them are actually pretty qualified, meaning they can do the job. So everyone can do the job. What that really means is that you have to prove that you're a person who can do more than what the job is expecting of you. They want to see that you can improve their processes and contribute to the company more than what you're worth. And those hard points really help you prove that you've done that in the past for a different position. It's kind of a way for you to check yourself as well. Often when you put results on a resume, that is a clear flag for a recruiter to go and look at that and be like, wow, that's something I'm gonna go in an interview and try to make sure this guy knows what he's talking about. And if they already have to do that, that means they're already interested in talking to you more. And also it's good for yourself, because I think if you can't speak to the results, at a different job that you've had, how are you really showing that you're qualified for this job that you're applying for? So definitely be honest, but also, it's a good way for you to vet your best chances of getting a job somewhere, because you definitely want to show all the skills that you've done and all the work that you've done, and be able to, attest to that. So no matter what, if you go and write a position on your resume, please make sure you have at least 1 or 2 hard points that show that you actually went above and beyond. Cool. Once you've gone and made sure that you have some hard points in your resume, you want to make sure also that your different positions are showcasing as many different skill sets that you've worked on as possible, right? So you might have worked in 3 different labs, doing something very similar, and you might have the same type of results here and there, but I think even if that's the case, there's definitely something different that can be taken from each job. And you want to show that you're not just good at one thing. You want to show that you've improved things like leadership skills, technical skills, communication skills, managing skills. Your resume is only 1 page. You only have so much space to show that you are a well-rounded person and that you have many different skills and that you've done them in a lot of different places too. I think one of those things to think about is that in your resume, when you've proved a point already, maybe your first bullet is your most recent internship that you did, and you showed that you had really good technical expertise. You had some results there that show that you were really good at your research and you did, this and that. So from now on, from below that part of your resume, I'm gonna assume that you've done that at every other job you've had, right? So you might as well use the space below that to start proving other things that you've done for your job. So now I move on to the next part. Maybe it's a different research position, or you volunteered somewhere else, or you're an officer of a club. And I know you were on top of your technical stuff, but it's really now about showing a different skill, right? If you're applying for a particular job that is looking for a certain skill, it is good to kind of emphasize that skill that you've learned. Sometimes being repetitive for emphasis, if it really is necessary, you think, for the position, go ahead. But otherwise, for a lot of positions in companies that aren't very, very technical, they want to see a person that's really well-rounded, because most jobs that you take in industry actually touch a lot of different departments. I work in supply chain, for instance, and I work with engineering, finance, the legal team. To work with a lot of different teams, you need a lot of different skills. So I definitely need to be technical in some aspects of being a supply chain analyst, but I also need to have good communication skills with engineering. Finally, the last thing I would say is definitely let your personality shine in your resume. You know, there are a lot of things that people have done that aren't related at all to what the next job they're applying for. You know, maybe you managed a dance team, or were an athlete somewhere, or you know, are really interested in music or something. There is definitely a good emphasis on how your personality and your culture really fits into a company. It's almost just as important as your fit for the position itself, like in a technical aspect, right? For me, for instance, I was a figure skater before, and one of the things that my current director and I really bonded over in the interview was kind of the aspects of how being a figure skater really showed my drive and ambition and dedication to something when I really, really liked it. And you know, to work at my company right now, it seems that, you know, people there are very passionate and showing in the past that if I like something, I can be very passionate about it, and will go really, really all for it. They really like to see. So never discount yourself for anything you felt like you've been really passionate about in the past, or just think that you can transfer some aspect of that into your job that you're applying for. Often it's really just a case of attitude. You know, you go up and you just really try to show that you can sell yourself. And I think a lot of companies will, not necessarily like they'll buy it or whatever, but it's kind of like, it's you. You're that kind of person, right? So, and if you're not gonna be able to be yourself fully at a job, in your personality, in your work style, in your work ethic, your culture, you might not be the best fit for that company anyway. And I think ultimately the goal of trying to find a good job is not only one that puts, you know, food on the table, but also one that where you feel like the people you work with and the company culture, what the company does, all that sort of stuff is kind of a whole package that you really want to be able to enjoy every aspect as much as you can. Alright, that's it for now, guys. Check in again next week. Probably have another video on something. I have a list of topics here. If you have any questions for me specifically, feel free to reach out. I'll put my info in the description box below. Hope y'all are having a great summer. Peace.